In 2003, the British cycling team employed a new director of performance. His name was Dave Brailsford, and up until that point, the British cycling team had won nothing. In 100 years, they were incredibly mediocre, to the point where some brands refused to give them equipment, afraid that them being seen using their equipment would be bad for their reputation. When this new director of performance came along, he believed in the power of marginal gains. Basically, he looked to improve every smallest thing by 1%. He believed that if you did that, all of these things would compound and improve. We're talking about usual stuff like lubrication, seating, size and shape, but also down to weird things like the amount of dust in the transportation van and what mattress the athlete slept on. And it soon happened after years of doing this that the British cycling team went on to break 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. That is the power of small marginal gains. So today, we are going to talk about how we can improve our performance in the editing suite by marginal amounts across everything, so that we can build up to a faster performance, we can cut faster, deliver faster, and essentially reduce our stress, because we can meet these ever-decreasing timelines, time schedules that are coming our way, and we can beat them and still keep our sanity and keep the client happy. And let's be honest, time is money. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Video Editing Podcast from Unsplice, the only platform dedicated to helping self-taught video editors become pro. My name is Shiny, and I'll be your host and your mentor for the day. But we have one extra guest. Today we are joined by Premiere Gal, also known as Kelsey. And she has an incredible YouTube channel where she covers all sorts of Premiere Pro, After Effects, and Photoshop tips. And she is a fantastic resource. She has 400,000, like 430 something thousand subscribers on YouTube, and she's on Instagram. You'll find her everywhere. But she is going to share with us because she has a team working with her, and for her, turnaround is key. And I think for most content creators as well, getting the content turned around as fast as possible is key. So she shares with us some of the tools that she uses. She shares her workflow from the very beginning, from the moment she shoots until delivery, and how she tries to save time at each point, the apps that she uses, plugins as well. And we also talk about hardware, actual physical peripherals, and if they actually make a difference, and which ones are good. But before Kelsey joins us, I just want to let you know that on December the 20th, you can join the Editing Faster workshop. Unsplice is hosting another hour and a half creative editing workshop. This time it's on how to edit faster. Most of a lot of the tricks will be within Premiere Pro, but a lot of them will be usable across software. So the keyboard shortcuts and that sort of thing will be Premiere Pro specific, but there are a lot of workflow techniques that will cover any software. So if you feel like you could improve the speed of your editing, come join us on the 20th of December. And if you miss that, you can still catch the recording, because every monthly creative editing workshop that goes on is living in Unsplice Pro. So if that interests you, head to unsplice.com/pro to sign up, and I'll see you there. All right, let's join Kelsey. Kelsey, hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Shiny. Thanks for having me here on the Video Editing Podcast.
My pleasure. You have a very dedicated following on Instagram, on YouTube, and many channels. And the content you create, you specialize in, correct me if I'm wrong, you specialize in editing and motion graphics and Photoshop as well.
Yeah, a bit of Photoshop as well. I think, we're all kind of like hybrid creators now, right? Like you just don't know one thing. I would say the specialty and the niche started in video editing, and then kind of like that's the hub with like different spokes of other creative tools that I find myself using over time. But definitely Adobe Creative Cloud Suite was kind of like the main tool set that I was using at the time that I started the channel and when I was becoming a professional. Of course, I'm always been a Mac user. I've loved Apple. I used to work in the retail store. I was one of those people with the shirts that was like, oh yeah, if you're a video creator, maybe you should try this MacBook Pro,
Amazing.
And so I've always loved Apple. So I was actually on Final Cut Pro 7 in the studio before they moved over to the FCPX or Final Cut Pro, I guess they just call it now.
Yeah.
But when they made that switch, the user interface of Premiere was quite more natural for me.
Yeah.
So it just made sense that I was kind of doing most of my tutorial and, guides, I should call them, in those tools. Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar to me. I was started on FCP7 and then when that was terminated, migrated over to Premiere. I think it's quite natural for a lot of FCP7 users. And I miss it a lot.
Yeah, it was weird. I actually hung on to it for several years once they terminated it before I made that migration over.
Yeah, I did the same with QuickTime 7. Do you remember QuickTime 7?
Oh my gosh, yes. I remember that.
That was good. And for those, which is probably most everyone who have never too young for QuickTime 7, it was a QuickTime player that was just, you could export and transcode in it. It was so powerful. But
yeah, I know. I remember like holding on to that software and migrating it over when I would move from a different laptop. And now it's like forgotten, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, I held on to it and passed it along until the very point where it was 32-bit and then 64-bit came along and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, at some point you have to say goodbye. Anyway, today we are, I'd love to pick your brains because I'd love to talk about efficiency, editing efficiency, and some like really tactics as well as tools and plugins to kind of help the editing process be as efficient as possible and help the editor be as efficient in their process.
Sure.
So let's start from the very beginning and sort of things that you do from the moment that you've got the footage. Okay, you've been handed a hard drive or you did the shoot. From that moment, what things do you do to help the editing process go as smoothly as possible?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So like before I started Premiere Gal, I was a kind of a video producer that wore multiple hats as well. And I was editing short documentaries for social video. And, I would actually go out and shoot. So I wouldn't wait for somebody to give me the footage. I was the one recording the footage too. But, I would create a folder structure. And this is something I developed over time where I would have a project folder, which contains all the project files. So whether it's After Effects or Premiere Pro or Photoshop. And then I have a media folder, which is where I store the footage, the audio, the music. And then I have an output folder that I just called output. So that would be like V1, rough cut, V2, fine cut, V3, please be the final. Please be the final. Those awful names that we would use when we were first starting out. And now I'm trying to keep like V1, V2, V3, and I kind of never write final anymore because I never actually know until I upload if it's final.
Yeah.
And in that folder now, I also, because I do YouTube content now, I also have a thumbnail folder inside of that where I store my Photoshop and different versions of the thumbnail, because the thumbnail is very important these days, right? And I also have in kind of the root folder, now that I have an editing team, I have 2 editors that help me with my edits, I have a recurring assets folder. And I call it recurring assets because I couldn't really come up with a better word for it, but it's kind of like the branding folder. But in that folder, I put logos of sponsors we use all the time, different sound effects and tools that we use all the time. One of the tools that I use a lot, and I actually, created licenses for my other editors, is the Toko graphics pack by Motion Can, and it's a Motion Bro extension. So it gives us, the same big titles, the kinetic titles, social media graphics, sound effects, all sorts of different elements that we can all use, and we all link back to that folder, so that way it stays consistent. And
Great, that sounds super useful.
yeah,
I'll put a link to that in the show notes, because I've not heard of this, and I'm keen to check it out. It sounds like a lifesaver.
absolutely. And another tool that we recently started using is called Soundq. It's a new application it's for both Mac and PC, and it's by the company Pro Sound Effects. So it's Pro Sound Effects Soundq with the letter Q. And what it essentially allows you to do, they have a free plan, but basically you can browse their free sound effects and music, and you can also browse freesound.org. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, Shiny, but it's like Creative Commons licensing, some public domain sounds. So if you're just starting out, it's a really great resource if you can't afford like a subscription.
Nice.
And
is that kind of like the Prelinger archives? You know this one?
Is that British?
That's no, I think it's based in Washington.
Really? I haven't heard of that. Probably. It's very similar.
Yeah, prelingerarchives.org, I think it is. And you can download adverts and moving pictures from everything that's out of license, basically. So from 75 years and back. They got some really, really cool stuff, like some 1930s soap adverts and things like this.
That's super cool. Yeah, a very similar idea of that is to kind of have an archive of assets from the past and current ones as well. The reason why I love this app and why it's related to efficiency is that, if you're a subscriber for like, let's say Epidemic Sound or like Artlist, one of those big ones, you go to their web browser, you search, you download, you drag that track into your project panel, and then you import it into Premiere Pro. And that's like 4 different steps, right? What Soundq does is, let's say you have a collection of sounds or you're a subscriber of the Pro Sound Effects library, you can actually create collections of sounds that are on your hard drive, and you can search for it in the Soundq app and be like, oh, skateboarder sound. And then you can just press S on your keyboard or click this little green button that says send to Premiere Pro, and it imports it into Premiere Pro wherever your playhead is, and it imports the file for you in the same location as your project file. And you can change that location. So the reason why I like it is it's just, an application where you can organize all your sounds, even if it's not Pro Sound Effects. Let's say you've been using Artlist for over a year and you have all these amazing sounds that you've downloaded. You can create that collection and put it inside of the Soundq app, so you can just press S, send. And it's kind of like a plugin, I would say, but in the same time it's his own app with that direct dynamic link between the 2 apps. And it's fairly new. Like, they just launched it, I think, in May of this year. And I did like a little getting started tutorial for them, and I listed them in my most recent video on like 5 free plugins for Premiere Pro, which I published recently.
Okay. Really useful. That sounds amazing.
It's super cool.
Yeah, that for me is such a pain that it's such a simple process, but it's laborious, finding all the assets, putting them in the right place, and then bringing them in, and also transcoding them if they're not in the right format. So that's super, super useful.
It fills that gap that I've been seeing in a lot of different tools that I use. And of course, so many different software tools are creating panels inside of Premiere Pro that just make everything more efficient. For example, stock video. I mean, Adobe Stock, you can search for templates using, the Essential Graphics panel, but Storyblocks recently created a plugin panel. So I was recently working on a documentary edit. And by the way, as a side note, I recently, while I've been like primarily just producing tutorials, I've been kind of putting my energy out there that I'm like, oh, I want to like edit more like personal projects, I want to like edit maybe for Netflix or edit, I don't know, just some short, cool like things, So I was, my friend Sarah Snow, who runs Snow Media Co., she does a lot of projects for clients, and they use Storyblocks. So I downloaded the Storyblocks panel, and I was just searching for some stock video because I needed to use some stock video clips, and I just searched right there in the panel, and it automatically downloaded into my project panel, and it was just so more efficient than going into the browser. Same sort of concept as Soundq.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And what format does it bring? What format of video does it bring it in?
You can choose in Storyblocks,
awesome.
which is nice. So you can choose the HD MOV or 4K MOV file, which is ProRes, or you can use the more compressed version, which is great because if it's a social video, you don't really need ProRes. So I usually download the smallest version possible, which really compressed some of their files that are just in HD and .mp4, H.264 codec. It's just 6 megabytes or something. Sometimes I'm like, hell yeah, let's get the 6 megabyte to get the save space, right?
Yeah, exactly. Man, that's super useful. Yeah, and this kind of reminds me of Frame. Excuse me, Frame. Frame.io.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, of course. Which is, even it got bought by Adobe fairly recently.
Yeah.
Even way before that, I was using it, and it's just amazing how that fits into the interface as a plugin. And for anyone that doesn't know what it is, it's a work in progress review tool. So you can send your export from the timeline, upload it to Frame, send a link to the client, and then the client can comment on the video, and then it all comes down into your timeline in Premiere, and you can just work from there. It's
and it's not a plugin anymore because it was bought by Adobe. Now when you go up to Window, you can select Review with Frame, and it's built in, which is really cool.
Amazing. So good. So we've run through a huge list of
I can keep going.
Things. I can keep going. Great. No, yeah, we're going to. So that takes us kind of up to the point of like building the edit. What do you recommend in terms of like? So let's talk a little bit about building the edit.
Absolutely.
With a blank timeline, you've got all of your assets in now. How would you go from here? The best way of creating an edit?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the edit that you're working with. In terms of my YouTube edits, like I try to make them as efficient as possible, and usually I'll end up making like a step-by-step guide. I'll kind of walk through. I don't do like a full script. I don't use a teleprompter, but I kind of list out points and kind of practice and prepare all my assets. So the recording is as concise as possible. Usually my recordings are sometimes between 20 and 40 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer. And that way I'm as concise as possible. I know what I'm going to say so my editors don't hate me, where I'm like, Sometimes there's like, somebody walks by or the dog barks or something and I have to pause, or there's like an airplane or a siren in the background, so I have to pause. But generally, I try to make it as efficient as possible. And as I was saying before, we make our project assets like very clear with recurring assets and use these panels to make it more efficient. But generally, if I'm editing one of my YouTube edits, which I still do on occasion, I'll, drag and drop. I kind of use multicam because I do have a screen recording and my main camera at the same time. But we don't actually use multicam because it's just 2 angles. So what we end up doing is just dragging the video clip and the corresponding screen recording clip and control, lasso and select them and synchronize. So that way we get everything in the timeline. Once it's synchronized, from there, it's just kind of going through the edit really fast and cutting out the ums and the blanks and the pauses and the things that aren't necessary. And after that's done, that's when we go in and add the graphics, and we add, we do a little bit of color grading to make sure the lighting is good. And after that's done, sound, a little bit of grooming. I use a couple plugins, which sadly, don't exist anymore. There's one called AccuSonus that just stopped. Like, it was very weird, but I was like actually planning some like collaborations with them, and then like 2 months later they're like, actually we're decided to move on to other things. I'm like, what? I love your tool. And it's like a voice leveler. So I apply the voice leveler at the track level and a noise remover and like a mastering special special effect. What is it called? Mastering. It's under special effects, and it's actually not a plugin. It's built into Premiere Pro.
Yeah.
And once that's done, it's just kind of like making sure like there's no errors on the export. And this is like a pretty smooth process. But if you're doing something like a documentary, which is something I recently did, it was actually almost a hour and 40-minute interview. And so in that case, what I did is this actually had 2 different angles and it had one, good sound track. So what I did is I ended up doing multicam first to get the angles together. And I also did color grading first on the source level, which is actually really useful to do. And this was shot on 2 different cameras in the log format. So what I did is I used these free LUTs that are from this website. Gosh, I forget the name of it. I have a blog post. If you actually just search, if you Google like free LUTs, like free conversion LUTs from log to Rec 709, my blog will come up probably in the first 3 results, I'm guessing.
Okay, amazing. Yeah.
So you can find it and they're free. So I actually applied these conversion LUTs to the Sony S-Log2 and to the Canon log. And then from there, I just kind of did a little bit of finessing with Lumetri Color to make sure the colors were the same. So from there, like the master clips are color graded, right? They're the same.
Easy.
So from easy, right? So once that's set up, then I kind of duplicate that multicam sequence and I create what is called the cut down. So I just go through, I listen, if there's a section on a topic, I'll like last one select all those clips and, label it like red. And I'll put like a marker saying this is the part where they talked about this part of their life. And I would go through and just categorize it by color. And then from the cut down, I then duplicate that sequence and create what is called the selects, which are the sound bites that I think are going to really build that story. And from there, I start to reorganize the selects to build up that story. And once that's done, now it's the fun part. Now it's adding the B-roll on top and adding any graphics and the sound design from there. So I'm guessing it might be similar for a lot of editors out there, but usually the most strenuous and time-consuming part is going through that edit and categorizing the selects. You can use the text panel now, which is a little bit helpful, where you can transcribe the cut down to like quickly find something. And sometimes it doesn't transcribe it perfectly. It's still getting there, but it's
still
nice.
Really useful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's useful. But I found that I didn't quite use it that much. Usually when I'm editing, when I'm in the stage, I'll try to get the cut down done all in one sitting, because if I wait a day, then my brain forgets where those selects were. So
same.
It's a really good tip, actually. Like, even if you have to stay up till like 3 a.m., it's like, just get it done, because it's going to take more time in the future if you don't finish it all in one go.
Yeah, there's a tactical use of sleep. And I think, once you've watched the selects or the rushes, you're really, really familiar with the dialogue. That's the good time to go, oh, that would be good. Oh, they talk about this later on. We can bring that earlier. And then create it. It's just like a stream of consciousness, and then go to sleep. Because the next time you come to it, you'll be like, oh no. Oh, well, that's great. Oh, and then you realize you can kind of like build out a better edit from your kind of stream of consciousness first try.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that you mentioned when you're creating tutorials that you don't use multicam and you just synchronize the 2 clips. Why is that?
I find that multicam, at least for me, well, actually, technically, we have 3. Well, lost my elbow there on the desk. There's like 3 layers, actually, because I'll duplicate my talking head and put the mask around it, so I'm a talking head in the corner. And I find it just performs a little bit faster. When we use multicam, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just something with the programming of the software, but it lags a little bit more because I don't know.
I
It
think I
just
know
works
what
better.
you mean.
It just works better.
I think because you got the option with the program monitor and the source monitor, you can choose to have the multicam to see all of the cameras in your multi-camera sequence. So probably in the background, even if it's not visible, it's like playing back every single camera angle.
Yeah.
That
What
might
we
be
do
why.
is if I'm not using the screen recording at a certain section, which is usually on, video layer 2, we will right click on that section and disable it. So it's just disabled. So we kind of work well with that. And I don't know, I guess I need to talk with Stephanie and Rickard, my editors, to see if they actually prefer using multicam. I didn't ask them if they prefer it or not, but for them, they were kind of like, doesn't matter. I mean, it's just 2 angles. It's not like it's 5 angles. So
exactly, yeah. I don't think it's either here or there. It's like a personal preference thing. But it's really interesting to hear because with editing, as you know, there's so many ways. There's like a 1,000 ways to skin a cat, as they say. Like, all that really matters is the end result, and how you do it is really down to personal preference.
Yeah. So it works well for us. I mean, I tried multicam a couple times and I didn't really notice like a huge difference. I still need to have that other layer, that duplicate of my talking head on top. You can make the talking head part of the multicam sequence, which is interesting. What you can do is you can basically duplicate that clip, put it into a sequence, put a mask around it already so the background's transparent. And then when you create your multicam, you'll include that sequence as a third angle with your mask. So you can still use multicam with a masked angle, which is kind of an interesting approach to do it. And it's actually probably cleaner to do it that way. But at the same time, it's like you still need to duplicate that because you need to see that angle plus the other angle beneath it. So it's almost like that third angle needs to have the screen recording a part of it in the sequence.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's many different approaches, but that was another one that I've tried out before as well.
Okay, fantastic. And so now we've reached the point where we've built out the edit and we've thrown on the B-roll, we've done sound design. Is that pretty much the end point of how, your efficiency hacks, let's call them, I hate the word hacks, tips?
Yeah, I use actually a few different review tools and I've used them in the past. I actually first was using Wipster, which has really cool like on-frame selection. So you can actually just click on the video and you can like create drawings right away versus Frame. You have to like go down to the bottom and select the annotation tool and then annotate. So I started out using Wipster, and that's what I was using in the beginning when I was first doing client projects, because once the edit is done, I still need to get that approval, right? And that's what we were talking about briefly before when you mentioned Frame. So usually I'll just, export it out, whether it's using the panel for Wipster or Frame.io, and send it off to the client, and they can leave that time-coded feedback just to make sure everything looks good or see if there's any typos. I do the same thing with my editors. And because with Frame, right now the free plan, which gives you 100 gigabytes free with your Adobe Creative Cloud account, you can only have one other. Good. It's great, but you can only have one other collaborator. So I have Rickard with me on Frame.io, and then with Wipster, I have Stephanie because I need 3 and I just didn't want to pay for an upgrade, which is kind of cheap of me to do, but
no, not at all.
So that's what I ended up doing. So I have a Slack channel as well, which helps with efficiency, by the way, on that theme. So I have a Slack channel. We have an editing channel where I like share like new tools that will help with efficiency. And then I have like a private channel for both Stephanie and Rickard where basically I get notifications. Like there's an integration with Wipster and there's an integration with Slack with Frame.io. So if I leave comments on the Frame.io edit that Rickard edited, he'll see all my comments that he needs to do. And it's directly in the Slack channel. So he can see when I left comments and he can go in and make a fix and re-upload a new version. And once it's approved, it's like, at least for YouTube, then it's the stage of planning the thumbnail and everything that's going in the description box and adding YouTube
course, yeah.
chapters and all of that.
Yeah. And how would you say, going back a few years to when you were kind of just started creating content for YouTube to now, and your process and how it's evolved and, you know, got better over the years, how much time do you think it used to take you and it takes now?
Well, now it's just so much more efficient because I've gathered all these tools and kind of realized the power of using shared projects in the cloud. So now I pretty much store everything on Dropbox and just have a team plan where we can like upload and share assets. And when I'm editing, I'm actually editing directly from Dropbox, which is really cool. So if he finishes an edit or Stephanie, she finishes an edit, and, you know, I need to like go in and make a quick fix, I can open up that project file and everything will connect, you know? I don't have to be like, oh, Stephanie, send it to me. And they're actually based in LA and I'm over in Europe. So, so like that would be bad if something was disconnected, because then, you know, we're not on the same time zone. So
yeah,
I've definitely streamlined my process. And before it would take me, I would be up so late at night and I would be so drained and I started to not enjoy the process. So even if you're at that point where you're like, I don't know if I can hire somebody, or it'll help you grow faster and it will take away that pain of knowing that you filmed, and will cut into your personal time, your family time, and just overall that switch that I made of like letting go of the edit a little bit. And like it was good that I had that process because I was able to identify how can I make my edits more concrete rather than like doing it off the cuff. I did a little bit of pre-planning first, created and all the demo assets beforehand, so it's just much more smooth process. So while I was pretty efficient still at editing, it was just kind of like on these random hard drives. I wasn't as organized and the project panel looked very scary by the end of the edit. And now it's just more, I can just kind of let it go, and once I film it, which is just such a relief.
Yeah, great. It's a flow, isn't it? That you just kind of like get into after a lot of repetition. Yeah,
like with yoga, you know, it doesn't necessarily get easier. You just get better at hiding the pain. That's my
motto for life.
That's what a yoga teacher said to me once. I used to be like a huge practitioner of the Bikram hot yoga, and I did it like consistently for like 6 years, and I just loved it. It was like this meditative flow. And one of the teachers said, like, it's not like it gets easier because like you're in this like 105 degree Fahrenheit, you know, dripping sweat, like in these postures, like tangled up. She's like, yeah, it doesn't get easier. You just like get easier at like blocking out the noise, like take that into your life, you know? And it's the same thing like editing. Like a lot of people are like, oh, like how do you get faster in editing? And I'm like, it still takes a damn long time. Like you still have to like watch the footage and like get through it, you know? And you just get better at identifying like sound bites and like trusting your instinct more. And that's what I call, when you get to that level, it's called like the editing sixth sense, you know? So you have to develop, it's like,
true,
rather than seeing dead people, you see the truth. You see through the edit and you're like, oh, I'm definitely going to use that sound bite. And you just start to like know what is trash and what is brilliant when you're creating your selects.
That's it. And there was a point where I was cutting so many commercials that were kind of all in the same style, just because that's like what was coming my way. Maybe I got pigeonholed, but it just became so easy to be able to look at all the rushes and just pluck some moments that I knew would be perfect next to the shot I've got there. I don't even need to be like, try a few things. It's like, okay, yeah, that one will go there, that one will go there, that one will go there. And then you play it back and it works. But, you know, you can't really teach that entirely. There's portions of that you can teach, but really it is a muscle.
It is helpful to kind of look at the structure. Like if you're interested in editing or you want to improve your process, you can watch really well done stories and kind of see how they built that story up. And that way you can start to think about, the exposition, kind of the setup, or creating that intrigue and not giving too much information, and kind of like the different tactics they use to like build suspense. Like even in the short documentary edit I did, where it was like and the documentary it's actually a series of kind of warrior survivors of breast cancer, and it was kind of about like the diagnosis. So you kind of start out with like a sound bite of something powerful, and then use one of those subwoof, and then the fade out, and like you can start to like watch, and obviously you don't want to be too cliche, like kind of those reality series where it's like they say something and there's like a sound, a sub bass sound, like every like 30 seconds. You're like, okay, this is not that dramatic. Like, let's stop this. So you can kind of like, you have to be a good storyteller when you're an editor. Like you have to know that. Like it's almost like you're a writer, right? In a sense, but you're using clips to tell your story. So you really need to like study storytelling and kind of live a little bit too, so you know what makes a good story, right?
Yeah, that's it. It is something that can be taught and it can be learnt. And I think a lot of editors are scared that they're like, I don't really know how to tell a story. But it can be learnt, it can be taught, and it's when you actually understand it, it's very formulaic, but not in a bad way, not in a this I know exactly what's coming kind of way, but like a beginning, middle, end. That's that trope exists because it's true. You need all those things for a good story.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once you know the rules, that's when you can break them, right? And you can kind of play around with storytelling. Like, I don't know if you've watched Better Call Saul. It's like a new series. Well, it's not new, but the extension of Breaking Bad, and I'm on season 3 now, and I've been meaning to watch it for a while. And it at the beginning of every season, it starts from a different time, and they use black and white, and they kind of start different episodes at different time where it keeps you guessing, because they do transitions between the current time where somebody shuts the door and then somebody's opening a trunk, and it was from 10 years earlier, but they don't actually put that on the screen, right?
Cool.
They keep the viewer, like you kind of want to treat the viewer as intelligent. Like you don't want to treat your viewers as dum-dums. You want to keep them as kind of like very keen, intelligent, like, ooh, what's going to happen, And you kind of have to treat it like that. And as you start to become a good editor, you can start to see those things when you're watching things. It's a curse because you could start to just watch the editing all the time. Like, oh, that was a sick transition. And then Anya's like, I'm trying to like watch this, like as like a viewer. So I once you see it, then it's just like you can't unsee it, and I love watching it from an editing perspective, though. I think it's fun.
Yeah, same. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I guess what's going to happen, even if I don't say it out loud, and then when it happens, I'm like, yes, right.
Yeah.
But before we wrap this up, I wanted to bring it back to efficiency, and I was wondering if you had any hardware or extra tools that you use or that you think bring an extra added element of efficiency to your workflow.
I use a screen recording software for Mac only. Unfortunately, it's called Capto, and it's really, really useful. I can create a selection of my screen, or just do like 1920 by 1080 or 4K. And I can record directly with my USB mic. And this mic is actually super tiny, and it plugs in directly into my laptop by a USB-C. And I just make sure that the volume is set at the correct level for the input. And that way I have my good audio already synced with the screen recording. And I have my camera set up, just here on the right, and I have a little monitor on top so I can see myself. And that was a game changer for me, because using the small like LCD screen, sometimes you miss a few things, and it just helps with the visuals. You could, if you wanted to, and I have tried this, you can get a capture card and record your camera directly into your computer, if you wanted to do that using like QuickTime Player, you can actually record the input from there.
Yeah.
But I just use the SD card and pop it in right after I film. What else do I use? Google Docs. I mean, it's very useful. That's where I make my notes
of
and
course. Yeah.
have it here on screen.
Yeah. Do you have any peripherals? I have this, which is like my lifesaver, the ShuttlePro V2. I don't know if you've seen this.
I have used it, and I didn't really find it that useful for my workflow. They said it to me before, and I did enjoy it. But yeah, shortcut keyboards. Talking about keyboards, I have used shortcut keyboards. I've used what is it called? Loupedeck for color grading. I have the Loupedeck, the creative one. It's like the little palette, and I've used that for like quickly like going through the timeline or setting like, you know, shortcuts like export LUT or export video. So yeah, there's so many different things that you can use. And I really like wireless keyboards, and that's something that I'm working on right now to create something that can create efficiency for other editors.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so a partner that I've been like working with in the past, where they make some microphones and keyboards, it's called Editor's Keys, and it's actually based in the UK. And we came together about a year ago, and we're like, hey, like, you know, do we want to like collaborate on a keyboard? Because some of their backlit keyboards that they have, they're wired, and the colors are like kind of like too colorful, like to the point where
the rainbow ones
doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing. But I really like the keyboards they had. And one time they sent me the wired keyboard with the backlit, and it had a little Gal logo on it, and they did it especially for me. And I was like, oh, that's sweet,
cute.
You know. And I was like, maybe other people would want to have something like this, but I'm not quite sure if this is the right keyboard. So we came together, played around with like different color palettes, made sure that all the default shortcuts are on the keyboard, which if you're an editor, I know that you probably do set custom keyboard shortcuts, but all the default ones, generally, I don't really change those unless it's like one that's like kind of, I would never remember, but generally I keep all of the defaults. Yeah. And then you can add more on top of that.
Exactly.
Which you remember as you go along, right?
Yeah.
So this new keyboard, which is currently kind of like in the pre-release stage, it's like a wait list. You can go to premiergal.com/keys to join the wait list. But maybe by the time this podcast is out, it will be available
fingers crossed
for purchase. But essentially, it's using the color palette of Premiere Pro. So like the logo colors plus the yellow that I use in my videos all the time. So you could, like, if something requires you to press Shift or like Option, it has a yellow indicator on that key that it requires you to press the Shift or the Option first.
Oh, nice.
So it helps guide you through that. So everything has a functionality on there. And my favorite part is that it's PC and Mac. So it's a hybrid.
Awesome.
So where it says it has Command and Control, and it also has Option and the Alt key for PC users. So that way people aren't like, oh, well, I need the PC version. It's just like one go. And if you're
amazing.
A hybrid user, then it's perfect for you.
I'm working on a job at the moment. I'm a Mac user, but I'm working on a job, and it's a remote. I have to remotely connect, and they're PCs, and my keyboard's just like
I know.
It's like, okay, I gotta retrain my hands now. So that's super, super useful.
Yeah, so very, very excited for it, and it's wireless, and you can plug it in if you want to, because it has that USB, just like a Magic Apple keyboard, same sort of thing. And you connect by Bluetooth, and once you charge it up, it should last for several months before you have to charge it again.
Oh, amazing. So, it sounds like the dream keyboard, to be honest.
I really hope that it takes off, and I've gotten some great feedback. I mean, I shared it on Twitter just yesterday, actually. It's very new, and I did an Instagram story, and it seems like a lot of people really like the design, so I hope it takes off.
I saw a picture, and it's beautiful. It's so elegant, and that's my worry about the editors, editing keyboards in general. They just don't fit with this kind of like
minimalist aesthetic that I enjoy, and I think a lot of other people do. Like, a tidy desk is a tidy mind. I can't work if there's
Yeah,
a lot going on, if it's busy. And so those editing keyboards with the rainbow colors didn't fit my aesthetic. So
for
when I saw
sure.
the picture of yours, my jaw dropped. It's beautiful.
It still has a little bit of flash of color, but the best part is most people, I mean, I know a lot of editors that, edit late at night, and it's backlit so you can like see the keys if you need it. And, some people, you may, after time, you may not even look at the shortcuts, right? It just looks nice, right?
And then if that's the case, then it worked.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's just getting started. But yeah, it's a very niche product. But I've been wanting to do a product for a while and I couldn't figure it out. And then this just seemed like a perfect fit. I mean, Premiere Gal, Premiere keyboard, come on,
Yeah, right.
makes sense.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. So premiergal.com/keys. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
Perfect. All right. Head there if you want to check it out. Thank you so much for your time today, Kelsey.
Oh, you're welcome, Shane. It was a great conversation. I love it.
Yeah, it's going to take me a while to write up all the notes and put all the links to everything we spoke about. But it's really much appreciated. Where can everybody find you?
You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/PremiereGal. My handle on Instagram and TikTok is at @Premiere_Gal. And same on Twitter, the underscore between the two words.
Amazing. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shiny. Cheers.
See ya. Well, I don't know about you, but I find that super useful. And some of those apps I am definitely going to be using going forward. I've put some links in the show notes so you can find those apps specifically. I think Soundq sounds like the one that I'll probably implement the soonest. Seems really, really useful. Having a dedicated app with all of your sound effects and sound effects in the cloud, not bogging down on your hard drive, that you can just seamlessly drop into Premiere whenever you like. Super useful. I'm going to be using that. And if you are looking for more techniques to help you speed up your editing, then come join us on December the 20th live for a creative editing workshop in Unsplice Pro, where you can learn keyboard shortcuts, as well as you'll learn how to assemble your edit in the fastest way possible, some workflow techniques and tips, and also some tricks when you are playing around with clips on the timeline, because once you have a full timeline, it can be a little tricky to make the smallest changes. So we're going to be talking about some tips to help make that process a lot easier. Unsplice.com/pro if that interests you. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thank you. Take care. Bye.